Hey guys, tonight we take a slow walk through the kind of tired that goes deeper than sleep can reach. It's not just your body, it's your will, your spirit, your sense of purpose. You wake up not because you're eager, but because it's what you're supposed to do. Your limbs move through the motions, your mind follows routine, but somewhere under the surface, something feels worn, frayed, not broken, just quietly exhausted. And yet here you are again, awake, alive, trying. Tonight, we explore what it means to keep going when you're tired of trying. Not in some grand, heroic way, but in that soft, persistent endurance Stoic philosophy understands so well. You'll find that you don't need to fix everything or even feel better right away. You just need to see more clearly what's yours to carry and what never was. Here's a gentle reminder. You will never control the world, but you can learn to control how you meet it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling up for it, leave a comment below with where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing where these quiet journeys reach. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to the ceiling again. That same patch of light, the one that seeps through the blinds before the world is quite awake. You lie there, letting the seconds stretch. You know you'll get up, you always do, but for now your body stays heavy. You don't feel lazy, you don't feel defeated, you just feel tired. It's not just about sleep, not the kind a nap or strong coffee could fix. It's something deeper, a fatigue rooted in the constant push. To be better, to be enough, to meet expectations, both spoken and silent. A Stoic would not tell you to snap out of it. Marcus Aurelius, in his meditations, often began his mornings wrestling with the urge to stay under the covers. He reminded himself that he was made for work, but even then he acknowledged the weight, the fatigue. There's something oddly comforting in that image, isn't there? The emperor of Rome, conqueror and philosopher, lying in bed, dreading the day just like you. But here's the first truth Stoicism offers you tonight. You don't have to feel like doing something in order to do it well. The Stoics didn't chase energy. They didn't wait for motivation to arrive. They leaned into purpose. You get up, not because you're inspired, but because you understand the role you've chosen to play. Even if that role today is just showing up. There's a difference between numbly forcing yourself through life and quietly honoring your responsibility. One is self-punishment, the other is discipline. Stoicism favors the latter, not the rigid, cold kind, but the kind born of compassion. I do what I must because I chose this path. Still, you're allowed to feel what you feel. That's where many people misunderstand Stoicism. It doesn't ask you to not feel. It only asks that your feelings don't own you, that you acknowledge them without being swallowed whole. So tonight, maybe you reflect. Is this tiredness something physical, or is it the emotional weight of constantly measuring yourself? There's a difference. A nap won't fix self-doubt. A vacation won't heal the pressure of never feeling like enough. But awareness, that's a beginning. That's something real. You notice the way your breath moves, shallow at first. Then, as you let go of the need to do, it deepens. The tension in your shoulders softens just a little. The thoughts don't disappear, but they lose their sharpness. This is not denial, this is presence. Stoicism teaches presence not through escape but through clarity. You learn to see, this is the feeling, this is the thought, and this is me, observing it all, choosing how to respond. Maybe today you won't check every item off your list. Maybe you won't impress anyone, won't even feel proud of what you did, but you can still live with integrity, with awareness, with quiet strength. That too is enough. Remember, fatigue is not failure. Some days, the strongest thing you can do is whisper, "I'm still here," and mean it. Here's a thought to hold gently. Philosophers still debate whether endurance is noble if it brings no reward. But maybe the reward is the endurance itself. Maybe just being awake and aware, and here is something holy. You don't need to chase meaning tonight. Let it come to you like waves to a still shore. You're not broken. You're not alone. You're just tired. And that's okay. You shift under the sheets, not out of restlessness but habit. The day hasn't asked anything of you yet, and still, your mind is already a little full. Thoughts gather like dust, unfinished tasks, unspoken expectations, quiet fears. It's subtle, almost invisible, the way that weight creeps in before your feet even touch the ground. But something inside you has begun to notice it. The weight doesn't feel neutral anymore. It feels misaligned, like some of it was never yours to carry. There's a quiet Stoic principle that begins to echo. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. And sometimes we also carry more in imagination than necessity. Look closely. How much of your exhaustion stems not from doing, but from anticipating what others will think, what you should be, what you're supposed to want? There's trying and then there's performing. They're not the same. One comes from the core, the other from the audience. Seneca, who spent much of his life in both the public eye and internal conflict, wrote often about this divide. Even as an advisor to emperors, he feared becoming a puppet of other people's desires. He reminded himself daily to distinguish between what belonged to him and what didn't. So ask yourself, which burdens have you chosen, and which were handed to you in silence, wrapped in words like should and supposed to? Maybe it was the dream you never wanted, inherited from someone else's fear. Maybe it's the standard of perfection whispered through comparison, social media, family, friends. Maybe it's the idea that rest must be earned, that your worth is always waiting to be validated by someone outside you. Stoicism teaches that the only true possessions are those of the soul. Your thoughts, your choices, your responses, these are yours, everything else. Loaned, temporary, beyond your domain. And if something is outside your control, why let it govern your peace? It's here that a subtle paradox enters, because even care can become a burden. Caring about others is noble. But when care turns into carrying what isn't yours, fixing their moods, absorbing their expectations, solving problems you didn't create, you cross into quiet self-abandonment. And slowly you tire. But not all weight is yours. Not all voices are meant to be obeyed. Tonight, imagine setting some of that down, not in defiance but in clarity. You can still love people without holding everything for them. You can still be kind without being consumed. Picture the philosopher Epictetus, a man born into slavery who lost all material agency, yet discovered that his freedom lived in what he refused to believe. Even in chains, he chose what thoughts he would nurture, which stories he would follow. His mind, no one could occupy. Maybe your exhaustion isn't weakness but a sign. You've been carrying too many things that don't belong in your hands. And tonight, just for now, you let one slip. Start small. Let go of the need to explain yourself. Let go of the idea that healing must look productive. Let go of the imagined version of you that always has it together. You are not a performance. You are a process. Feel your breath again. Gentle, enough. No one's watching here. No one's grading how well you rest. And in that space, there's an odd kind of power. The moment you realize what you don't need to hold, your hands feel lighter, your spirit clearer. Some philosophers argue that the true test of wisdom is discernment, knowing not just what to pursue, but what to release. And maybe they're right. Maybe wisdom is the art of traveling with less. So, what can you put down tonight? Not forever, not dramatically, just enough to feel your own center again, enough to remember that your value was never tied to how many burdens you could endure. You lie still, your breath moves freely, no proving, no pushing, just the stillness of returning to yourself. The world will keep spinning without your tension. Let it. It doesn't take long before the inner voice returns. Not the kind that guides you gently or reminds you to breathe, but the judge. Stern, quietly relentless. It doesn't shout. It simply leans in and asks, "Why aren't you doing more?" Or worse, "Is this really the best you can be?" You recognize it now, though. It's not your enemy. It's not even truly you. It's a fragment of all the times you've tried to earn worth through effort. All the years you thought perfection was the price of peace. Stoicism doesn't deny this voice. It hears it and places it in its rightful role. To the Stoics, discipline wasn't about punishment. It was about liberation. Discipline, they believed, was what freed you from the chaos of impulse, from the confusion of wanting too much or fearing the wrong things. But the discipline they spoke of was never laced with shame. That's the mistake we make. We turn self-discipline into self-judgment. We punish ourselves for not meeting invisible standards, when in truth, the wise Stoic doesn't seek to be perfect but to be aligned. There's a story from the life of Cato the Younger, a Roman statesman and Stoic exemplar. Known for his extreme integrity, Cato once walked barefoot in the Roman streets, dressed in plain wool, refusing luxury not to prove anything, but to train his mind not to need it. He didn't care if people mocked him. His focus wasn't on appearances, but on internal strength. But imagine if he had done it to impress others, or to beat himself down for liking comfort. There's a fine line between inner discipline and inner tyranny. Tonight, you toe that line. You hear the inner judge, and instead of shutting it out, you ask, is this voice guiding me or just shaming me? Because there's a truth that doesn't get spoken enough. Self-criticism can mimic discipline, but it doesn't nourish you. True Stoic discipline is patient. It understands that you will stumble, that effort will wax and wane. It focuses not on your mood, but your intention. Did you act with reason? Did you return to yourself when pulled away? That's enough. So when the voice starts whispering, telling you you're lazy, that you're behind, that you should be doing more, pause. Look it in the eye. Ask it, what do you want from me? Sometimes that voice isn't trying to destroy you. It's trying in a misguided way to keep you safe, to prevent failure, to keep you valuable in the eyes of others. But fear doesn't build character. Love does, even love of yourself. Here's where things get subtle. You can be tired and still be worthy. You can rest and still be disciplined. In fact, choosing rest when your ego screams otherwise, that might be the strongest form of mastery. The Stoics would tell you to be a master of your own mind, not its prisoner. So tonight you lie there, no longer arguing with the inner judge. You listen, but you don't obey. You consider, but you don't collapse. That's the art. You begin to develop what Epictetus called proherses, the faculty of choice. The one thing no one can take from you. Not hardship, not failure, not the harshest voice inside your head. As long as you can choose your attitude, you remain free. And yes, you can choose softness, even in tiredness. Some scholars argue whether inner judgment is ever truly escapable. Perhaps it isn't, but maybe the point isn't to silence it. Maybe it's to hear it and still act from a place of peace. So as your mind wanders back through the day, the things you didn't finish, the messages you didn't return, the little moments you think you could have handled better, breathe. Acknowledge them. Then release. You are not on trial here. You are learning. You are trying even when you're tired of trying. And sometimes the effort is simply staying present when every instinct wants to flee. Let your breath be the gentler voice tonight. Let it remind you that you're not failing, you're refining. You're not broken, you're becoming clear. You sit at the edge of your bed now, feet flat against the cool floor, elbows resting on your knees. The room hasn't changed, but something in you has shifted slightly. A tiny space has opened between the tiredness and the impulse to fix it. It's subtle, quiet, but it's there. And in that space comes a strange question. What if all this effort, this constant trying, has less to do with wisdom and more to do with fear? Not a dramatic, chest-clutching fear. A quieter one, the fear of standing still, of being left behind, of not progressing, not improving, not achieving. You've been told, by voices loud and subtle, that growth is always good, that effort is always noble, that the only way is forward, better, faster. But the Stoics weren't obsessed with progress. They were obsessed with clarity, and clarity sometimes reveals a hard truth. Not every kind of effort is worth your life energy. Not every improvement is aligned with the good. You can sprint for years in a direction that takes you further from peace. Take Marcus Aurelius. He ruled an empire and commanded armies, but he often wrote about letting go of ambition, not because he didn't care, but because he saw how easily it became a trap. He knew what it meant to be praised, feared, envied, and how hollow all that felt when he sat alone with his thoughts. He wrote about living according to nature, which didn't mean hugging trees. It meant acting in accordance with reason, with your essence. And your essence isn't frantic. It's not greedy. It's not scrambling to be enough. It's already enough. So tonight you consider this. Is it possible that some of your exhaustion comes not from failure, but from chasing an idea of progress that was never yours? The job title, the perfect version of yourself, the way you thought your life would look by now. You've been trying to level up like life is a game, and maybe in some ways it is, but not in the way you were told. Because the Stoic game isn't about external wins. It's about internal harmony. Let's imagine something strange. What if you stopped? Not forever, just for a moment. What if you stopped reaching, stopped perfecting, stopped improving for a single evening, and simply noticed yourself as you are? Would the world fall apart? Would you disappear? Or would you finally feel something you've been too busy to notice? You don't need to renounce all ambition. This isn't about throwing your goals away. It's about questioning their root. Are you doing this because it brings you closer to your virtue, the Stoic ideal of living with wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance? Or are you doing it because you're afraid of being seen as less? There's nothing wrong with effort, but not all effort is equal. Some nourishes, some depletes, some roots you deeper into yourself, some scrapes you hollow, and you can feel the difference if you slow down enough to listen. That's the irony of modern life. In our obsession with becoming better, we often become strangers to ourselves. Tonight, you choose differently. You listen not to the timeline of your imagined success, but to the rhythm of your own breath. Slow, present, still. This is not laziness. This is philosophical courage. The Stoics believed that the highest good wasn't status or speed or success, it was eudaimonia, a flourishing soul. A soul in alignment with truth, no longer tormented by illusions or cravings. And often, the soul flourishes not through doing more, but through doing less with deeper attention. Some philosophers debate whether it's even possible to progress without falling into ego. But perhaps that's the trick, progress not as performance but as refinement, not louder, quieter, not more, clearer. So if you wake up tomorrow and still feel tired, maybe you won't rush to fix it. Maybe you'll sit with it, ask it what it's trying to show you. Maybe you'll start measuring your life not in milestones, but in moments of real, conscious presence. And that might be the most radical kind of progress. There's a question you don't usually dare to ask, not out loud, not even in the mirror. What if I just stopped trying, not out of despair, not as surrender, but as a kind of quiet rebellion, a deep breath against a world that never stops demanding more? You wonder, if you let go of improvement, of ambition, of becoming, what would happen? Would the sky fall? Would everything unravel? Or would it finally, mercifully go still? Tonight, you let that question float in the air between you and the silence. The Stoics weren't strangers to such questions. In fact, they welcomed them, not as weakness but as portals into truth. They believed in effort, yes, but also in detachment. You act, not because you crave the outcome, but because action aligned with virtue is its own reward. And if that's true, then there's room for rest. There's room to stop trying so hard to matter, because you already do. There's a strange kind of strength in refusing to hustle for worth. Take Musonius Rufus, a Stoic teacher in exile. He believed that virtue wasn't something to be earned through suffering. It was something lived in the ordinary, in tending a garden, in caring for others, in meeting the day as it is, not as you demand it to be. He taught that a person could be complete and quiet at once, that trying, relentlessly, anxiously, wasn't a virtue unless it was guided by wisdom, and wisdom often says, enough. So tonight, try the unthinkable. Stop. Not everything. Just the noise, the racing thoughts, the subtle contortions of your spirit trying to fit. Just let them go, lie there, breathe. No checklist, no mental tally of how productive you've been. No attempt to transmute the moment into self-betterment. This is not self-help. This is self-allowance. You don't have to prove your value by how much you improve. What if you measured your life not by effort but by presence? By how deeply you tasted your coffee this morning? By how fully you listened when someone spoke? By how gently you treated yourself when no one was watching? Stoicism teaches the art of apatheia, not apathy, but freedom from unhealthy passions, from the churn of craving and aversion, from the feeling that you must always be reaching. And yet, apatheia is not passivity, it's lucidity. It's the clarity that arises when you're no longer tangled in the belief that life owes you a reward for your struggle. You do what you do because it's right. And sometimes, what's right is simply being. Some philosophers argue that if everyone stopped striving, civilization would collapse. But the Stoics would counter. It is precisely in ceasing the wrong kind of striving that we restore what's essential. So tonight, as you lie still and do nothing, understand. This stillness is not stagnation. It's a reclamation. You reclaim your time from the cult of endless productivity. You reclaim your attention from the shallow demands of perfection. You reclaim your identity from the illusion that you are only as good as what you achieve. You're not quitting. You're listening. And in that listening, a new truth arises. Trying isn't always the path forward. Sometimes trusting is. Trusting that who you are in this quiet moment without effort or performance is enough. Let the air move in and out. Let your thoughts drift like clouds. You're allowed to want less. You're allowed to stop reaching. The world doesn't end, it softens. You don't disappear, you arrive. And as the night deepens, you feel it, not the pressure to become, but the permission to simply be. You stay where you are, still, unhurried, untouched by the ticking clock. And something begins to settle in you, like dust finally returning to the floor. For the first time in a long while, you're not trying to make the moment anything other than what it is. Just this: breath, body, soft shadows on the wall, a mind no longer pushed to perform. And from that stillness, another idea begins to rise. What if peace isn't something you earn? What if peace is what's left when you stop trying to deserve it? The Stoics weren't chasing peace, they practiced it. Actively, daily. Not in temples or remote mountains, but in the mess of ordinary life. And that's what makes their philosophy so human. Epictetus, the philosopher born into slavery who had every reason to rage at the world, instead turned inward. He didn't deny pain or injustice, but he refused to let them govern his soul. He understood something few ever do. Your circumstances may be harsh, but your relationship to them is yours to choose. So tonight, you practice like he did. You sit not in resignation, but in quiet permission. You stop tweaking yourself. You stop reaching for some better version. And what you find in that pause is not laziness, but presence. For so long, you've believed that growth must be dramatic. But what if it's not? What if it's this quiet moment of noticing that you're alive before the next obligation arrives? There's no fanfare, no transformation, just a breath. Inhale, exhale. And in that rhythm, you begin to notice the edges of something beautiful. Acceptance, but not the kind that gives up. The kind that opens. The kind that says, this is where I am, and for now that is enough. There's a subtle paradox here, and it's worth sitting with. You don't improve by force. You grow by contact, with truth, with silence, with your own raw presence. When you stop resisting what is, you begin to see what could be with fresh eyes. Imagine a river. It doesn't rush to become the sea. It moves in rhythm with the landscape, yielding where it must, cutting through when it can, but always flowing. Never forcing. That's how the Stoic moves through life. Not stiff, but supple. Not frantically clinging, but flowing, anchored in the only thing that can't be taken, the choice to respond with reason. Some argue that this kind of passivity is dangerous, that we must strive, push, overcome. But the Stoic would answer, only when the striving is rooted in clarity. Otherwise, you're just flailing in elegant ways. So where does that leave you tonight? Here, in your bed, breathing, not as a task but as a return. You listen to the hum of stillness around you, the sound of a fan, maybe a distant car. The world hasn't stopped, but your war with it maybe that has. You lie down not as a project to be fixed, but as a person to be witnessed. You don't need affirmations. You don't need another goal. You need to remember that you've always had access to peace. It just gets buried under the noise of trying. And in this stillness, something sacred stirs. Not a revelation, not a breakthrough, just the calm sense that nothing more is needed, that life in this exact breath is complete in itself. Let that sink in. You are not behind, you are not broken, you are not late. You are here, awake in your tiredness, whole in your incompleteness, and more at peace now than you've been in a long while, not because you tried harder, but because you tried less. You notice something tonight, not just in your thoughts, but in the way your body sinks into the bed, how your fingers rest without clenching, how your breath no longer rushes to meet the next moment. You're tired, yes, but this time there's no shame in it. For once, you allow yourself to be tired without apology. This alone feels like an act of rebellion, because in a world that constantly pushes performance, fatigue is treated like failure. You've been trained to hide it, to explain it away, to outwork it. But tonight, you sit with it like an old friend. You say, I see you. You're not a flaw. This too is Stoic. Not the hardened version, the misreading of Stoicism as cold, emotionless strength. No, the real Stoicism is tender in its discipline. It asks you to confront reality fully, but never to beat yourself up for being human. You are allowed to be tired. Marcus Aurelius was, Seneca was, they all were. They just didn't let tiredness rule their reason, and they never confused tiredness with weakness. There's a moment in Seneca's writings where he says, sometimes, even to live is an act of courage. He was talking about those days when you get out of bed even when everything inside says, what's the point? He was talking about now. You are living, even through the exhaustion. That is not a small thing. But still, here's the tricky part. You're not just physically drained. You're soul tired, worn from the inside by expectation, comparison, perfectionism. And that kind of fatigue doesn't fade with sleep. It only fades with truth. So you look it in the eye. You say, yes, I'm tired, but not because I've failed. I'm tired because I've tried so hard for so long to be everything. There's grief in that sentence, but also grace. Because it means you're waking up, not just in the literal sense, but waking up to the reality that this level of effort is unsustainable. And more than that, it's unnecessary. You've earned the right to rest, not through suffering, but simply by existing. Your worth is not measured by output. Your spirit is not a machine. Let that truth settle into your chest. Feel your breath respond, not with anxiety, but release. There's nothing to defend here. No image to protect, just you, honest, tired, and still here. And in this moment, a different kind of power emerges. The kind that doesn't come from pushing harder, but from no longer hiding. You're not trying to appear calm. You are calm. You're not forcing peace. You're remembering it. Some Stoic thinkers argued that serenity is the highest good, not because it makes you passive, but because it makes you clear. And from clarity, action can arise, not desperate but deliberate. You'll still move forward. You'll still live with purpose, but not from the brittle edge of burnout, from a softer, sturdier place. Maybe tomorrow you'll speak with more kindness. Maybe you'll do one thing, not 10, but you'll do it without resentment. Maybe, just maybe, you'll begin to trust that rest itself can be an ethical act. Let others glorify hustle. Let them wear exhaustion like a badge. You're learning to honor fatigue without shame. You're learning to sit in stillness and know it's sacred, not because you've given up, but because you're finally starting to listen. You remember a time, maybe not clearly but viscerally, when ambition felt noble, clean like a torch in the dark. Back then, it wasn't about applause or competition. It was about reaching towards something bigger, becoming someone better. It felt like movement, meaning. But somewhere along the way, ambition changed shape. It grew sharper, hungrier. It began to whisper less like a calling and more like a demand. And slowly, without you noticing, that torch became a leash. You're not alone in this. The Stoics knew this transformation well. They wrote about it centuries ago. How what begins as aspiration can morph into ego, into craving, into slavery to things we once freely chose. Tonight, you look at your ambitions with new eyes. Which ones still feel aligned with your values, and which now feel like obligations wrapped in gold? Stoicism never condemned ambition outright, but it warned against ambition untethered from virtue. Marcus Aurelius wrote from the throne of an empire, yet he often reminded himself that power meant nothing if it eroded the soul. He questioned his motives daily. Why do I want this? What part of me is reaching? Is it my reason or my fear? And you too are invited into that reflection. What are you chasing right now? Recognition, status, mastery, even healing? Be honest, because sometimes even self-improvement becomes a disguise for unworthiness. You tell yourself, I'll rest when I become the person I'm supposed to be. But the goalpost keeps moving, and your soul keeps tiring. Tonight you call it out. Gently, you say, not all ambition is worth my life. That's not failure. That's discernment. There's a story, likely apocryphal, of Cleans, the second head of the Stoic school. Before he became a philosopher, he worked all night carrying water to support his studies. When people mocked him for doing menial labor, he said, "Better to carry water for philosophy than to let philosophy carry water for ambition." He didn't need admiration, he needed alignment. What would that look like for you? Imagine doing one thing tomorrow, not to get ahead, but to get closer. Closer to what feels real, to what feels like yours. You don't need to burn your goals. You don't need to renounce the world. You just need to notice. When does your ambition bring peace? And when does it bring pressure? And then act accordingly. There's a paradox here worth sitting with. You can be both driven and at ease. You can move forward without rushing. You can want things deeply and still be free from their outcome. That's Stoic ambition, rooted not in control but in integrity. And when you act from that place, the striving becomes smoother, quieter, like rowing with the current instead of against it. Tonight, let your breath remind you, you are not your achievements, you are not your goals, you are the presence beneath all of that. The witness, the chooser. You lie here not defeated but discerning. You're not stopping because you're tired. You're pausing because you're wise. And from that pause, a truer ambition can grow, not to prove but to live. Not to conquer but to connect. You don't need to climb every ladder. Some just lead to nowhere. Let that knowing soothe your mind. Let it soften your chest. Let it give your tired ambition permission to breathe. Not everything that glitters is worth chasing. And not all stillness is stagnation. Sometimes it's the start of something real. A memory surfaces. Not a dramatic one, just a small, stinging moment. A time when you tried your best and it still wasn't enough. Or maybe no one noticed. Or maybe you noticed how far from perfect it still was. You didn't fall apart. You moved on. That's what you do. But the imprint stayed. It lingers in the way you double-check yourself now, in the hesitation before resting, in the subtle flinch when someone asks, "How's everything going?" As if the answer needs to be great or else you've somehow failed the test. But here's what the Stoics might offer you in that moment. You were never broken. That phrase feels radical in a world that constantly suggests otherwise. But Stoicism insists that virtue, that inner alignment, that moral flame, is always within you. Sometimes buried, sometimes obscured by pain or fear, but never absent. Think of a marble statue still whole beneath layers of dust. The dust is not the stone. And your mistakes, your fatigue, your hesitations, they are not the core of you. Seneca once wrote, "No man becomes bad all at once." And by extension, no one becomes less than by a single mistake or even a season of exhaustion. You are not your worst moment. But do you believe that? Because you live in a world that teaches you to associate worth with performance. And when performance falters, self-image often collapses with it. Yet here's a Stoic truth worth cradling tonight. Your essence is untouched by failure. What matters is not the stumble, but how you rise, how you think, how you choose. There's a quiet resilience in that. Think of Marcus Aurelius again, ruler, philosopher, father. He dealt with betrayal, plague, war, and personal loss. Still, he wrote to himself in the second person, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. He reminded himself daily, not because he was weak, but because he was human. You're human too. So tonight, maybe you forgive that version of you, the one who snapped when you meant to stay calm, the one who froze instead of speaking up, the one who gave up for a while or said yes when your whole body said no. That wasn't failure, that was fatigue meeting complexity. You did what you could with what you had, and still here you are, listening, reflecting, returning. That's stoicism, not perfection but the act of coming back, again and again. You don't need to be flawless to be whole. And maybe that's the deepest kind of healing, not fixing yourself, but realizing you were never broken to begin with. Some philosophers debate whether the soul is inherently good or shaped only by its environment. The Stoics fell on the side of nature, that deep down we are rational, moral beings, that we long for virtue the way a seed longs for sunlight. So what would it look like to trust that? What would it feel like to lie here in the dark and whisper, not as wishful thinking but as a quiet recognition, I am already enough? You're not trying to trick yourself into confidence. You're remembering a truth buried beneath years of striving. You are not a project to be completed. You are a presence to be witnessed. And as you rest tonight, that presence softens. Not weaker, just more tender. More rooted in what endures beyond effort. You don't have to fight for worth. You only have to return to it, one breath at a time. It's quiet now. The kind of quiet you don't notice until something inside you stops clenching. No alarms ringing. No urgency in your breath. Even your thoughts, though still moving, no longer race like they used to. It feels like the world hasn't changed, but your place within it has. You are no longer trying to outrun the moment. And in this stillness, another truth begins to emerge, one so simple it almost feels like a whisper. Not everything must be resolved. Let it echo. Not everything has to be fixed. Not every knot needs untying. Not every question must be answered before you sleep. You've spent so long, haven't you, chasing closure like it's oxygen, endings, conclusions, certainty. But life, real life, is less about finishing and more about returning. Returning to yourself, returning to presence, returning to reason. The Stoics understood this deeply. They spoke of ataraxia, a state of unshaken tranquility, not because everything is figured out, but because the soul is no longer disturbed by what it cannot control. That's your practice tonight. Not fixing, not finishing, just softening into what is. Picture Marcus Aurelius again, surrounded by political chaos, family sickness, and military burdens, and still in the midst of that, writing thoughts like, "Don't let your mind be a slave. Be free." He didn't mean escape. He meant release. And here, in your own quiet space, you begin to do the same. You stop needing every feeling to make sense. You stop needing closure from every interaction. You stop needing to wrap your identity around whatever emotion happens to pass through your chest tonight. You simply let it pass. A thought comes. I haven't done enough today. You acknowledge it, you breathe, and then you let it go. Another thought. I should be stronger than this. You feel the weight of it, you nod, and then you release it too. This isn't detachment in the cold sense. This is grace. This is maturity. This is the realization that your peace no longer depends on having the last word, on solving, proving, perfecting. Some philosophers question whether emotional detachment is possible without emotional repression. But the Stoics invite you to something different, not numbness, but clarity, to feel fully, to let go wisely. And with each breath tonight, you do just that. You begin to sense the difference between resistance and response, between reaction and reason, between urgency and truth. What a relief it is, really, to know you don't have to keep spinning the wheel, that your tiredness isn't a signal of failure, but a natural rhythm returning to balance. The body reminding the mind that it's been working overtime, solving puzzles that were never yours to solve. So you lie back now. You surrender not as defeat but as alignment. No need to script tomorrow. No need to untangle every memory. No need to heal all at once. You're not a puzzle. You're not a story with a neat ending. You're a presence. You're a rhythm. You're a soul moving through seasons. And tonight you don't reach for understanding, you reach for stillness. And stillness reaches back. You turn slightly, adjusting the blanket with a soft pull, not out of discomfort but instinct. Your body is remembering safety, stillness, maybe even trust. Funny how rare that feeling has become. You've spent so much of your life gripping, tightening your mind around outcomes, bracing your heart for impact, clenching your jaw against the weight of unmet expectations. But tonight you're beginning to loosen, just a little. And in that looseness something sacred stirs, the courage to not know. The Stoics revered wisdom, yes, but not the kind that insists on certainty. They revered the wisdom that accepts mystery without fear. The kind that acknowledges, there are many things I may never understand, and I can still live well. Epictetus taught that you're disturbed not by events, but by your judgments about them. And what are judgments if not desperate attempts to assign meaning where silence might have served better? Tonight, you stop needing everything to make sense. That argument you had 2 days ago, it doesn't need a verdict tonight. That regret about something you said last year, it can remain unresolved. That question about where your life is going, you don't have to answer it right now. It's not apathy, it's perspective. You let go not because you don't care, but because caring wisely sometimes means resting in the unknown. Marcus Aurelius, ruler of Rome and student of impermanence, reminded himself often, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. He wasn't obsessed with death. He was obsessed with presence, with the urgent beauty of now. And in the soft dark of your room, you begin to feel that presence too. Not in the form of clarity or breakthrough, but in the quiet permission to be a little lost and still be okay. You're allowed to not have all the answers. You're allowed to be in transition. You're allowed to say, I don't know, and still belong here, fully, wholly, calmly. There's a certain paradox that arises here. Letting go of knowing often leads to deeper understanding. It makes space. It clears the noise. It softens the grip of pride. You've been carrying so many false certainties. Who you were supposed to be by now, how things were supposed to turn out, what people were supposed to see in you. But the Stoics knew that freedom begins where control ends. And control, especially over the unknowable, is the first illusion to surrender. So tonight you practice. You say gently, I don't need to have it figured out. You breathe into that sentence. You let it echo through your chest. You feel the strange relief of no longer being the architect of every detail. Some philosophers still argue whether surrender is just laziness in disguise. But true Stoic surrender is not withdrawal. It's the fierce act of aligning with what is and releasing what never belonged to you. You rest not because you've given up. You rest because your trying no longer brings you peace. And peace is what you are learning to choose. Let the unknown remain unknown. Let it breathe around you like wind through open windows. Not every knot must be untied tonight. Not every future must be mapped. Not every past must be rewritten. You are not here to fix the whole story. You are here to be awake in it. You breathe deeper now, almost without realizing it. The kind of breath that doesn't just fill your lungs but releases something you've been holding all day. There it is, that little sigh your soul has been waiting to exhale. It isn't dramatic, it isn't loud, but it's meaningful, because it marks a moment of return to yourself, to the truth beneath the roles you play. You're not trying to be the strong one tonight, not the smart one or the productive one or even the wise one. You're just being. And it's here in this stripped-down presence that the Stoic virtue of temperance rises quietly to the surface. Most people misunderstand temperance. They reduce it to moderation, to self-restraint. But to the Stoics, it was something deeper. Balance in the soul, the art of right measure, not too much, not too little, harmony between desire and reason. And isn't that what you've been seeking all along? Not extreme effort, not absolute withdrawal. Just a life that feels lived, not forced. A way of showing up that doesn't drain you or distort you. Temperance doesn't tell you to stop trying, it just asks you to stop overreaching. Seneca once warned against overwork disguised as virtue. He wrote about those who exhaust themselves in the name of busyness, calling it commitment, when really it's avoidance. Avoidance of silence, of self-reflection, of simply being still. How often have you done that? Pushed through exhaustion to prove you're still in control. Kept moving so you wouldn't have to feel. Chased one goal after another so you didn't have to face the hollow spaces in between. But tonight there's nowhere to run. And that's a gift. You lie here not in motion but in presence, not seeking but receiving. And slowly you begin to understand that balance isn't something you find out there. It's something you reclaim in here, in your breath, your body, your honest awareness. This is the paradox. You don't become balanced by effort. You become balanced by attention. So let's give that to yourself now. Notice how your chest rises and falls. Notice the way your weight sinks into the bed. Notice the quiet behind your thoughts, the space that isn't trying to say anything, just is. That's the ground of your being, not a role, not a task, just presence. And from that place everything softens. Even your goals begin to look different, not like ladders to climb, but paths to walk with care. Slowly, thoughtfully. Some argue whether temperance is too passive for modern life. But the Stoic would argue back. It's the absence of balance that burns us out. That fills our calendars and empties our hearts. That promises freedom through effort while quietly chaining us to more. Tonight, you unchain yourself. You no longer have to prove you're doing enough. You no longer have to choose between intensity and apathy. You get to live in the middle. You get to show up without spectacle. You get to rest without guilt. This is your practice. Right effort, right pause, right presence. Over and over again. No one sees it. No one applauds, but you feel it in your bones. And maybe tomorrow you'll carry this balance forward. Maybe not. But for now, you've touched it. And that's more than enough. So breathe again. Let the softness settle. Let the effort go. Let balance hold you like a quiet hand in the dark. The night has deepened now. The silence around you is thicker, softer, less like a void and more like a blanket. A quiet that doesn't demand anything. It just holds you. And slowly, your thoughts begin to drift toward the people around you, the ones you love, the ones you miss, the ones you sometimes struggle to understand. All those invisible threads that pull at your heart in quiet hours. And here, the next Stoic truth rises. You cannot control others. How many times has your exhaustion been rooted not in your own actions, but in trying to fix, help, change, carry someone else? You want them to be okay, to wake up, to choose better, to see the truth you see, but they don't, or they won't, or they can't. And it drains you not all at once, slowly, like a candle burning from both ends. But tonight you let it go. Not your care, not your compassion, just the illusion that you can control what isn't yours to hold. Epictetus spoke of the dichotomy of control, the foundation of Stoic practice. He taught that some things are up to us and some things are not, and freedom begins when we stop confusing the two. It sounds simple, but it's not easy, especially when it comes to people, because love makes us reach. It makes us want to protect, to shape, to fix. And sometimes that desire is so strong, we don't notice how it's turned into a burden, a pressure, a quiet despair. But the Stoic doesn't stop loving. The Stoic simply learns to love without possession. You offer presence, not control. Support, not saving. Compassion, not coercion. And when that becomes hard, when it hurts to watch someone walk a difficult path, you return to what is yours. Your choices, your peace, your boundaries, your breath. Marcus Aurelius had children who died, friends who betrayed him, generals who disobeyed. He couldn't make them act rightly. He couldn't guarantee any outcome, but he could govern himself. So can you. Tonight, maybe you forgive yourself for the weight you've carried on behalf of others, the overextending, the emotional labor, the silent expectations, all done with love, but love that wasn't always wise. And wisdom is what you're practicing now. You can love someone and still say no. You can care and still detach. You can hope and still rest. This is the Stoic way, not detachment as indifference, but as clarity. You are not cold, you are calm. Some philosophers argue that radical non-attachment is inhuman, But the Stoics would respond, "What's inhuman is sacrificing your peace to forces you cannot command." So tonight, come back to your circle of control. It is small, but it is powerful. Your thoughts, your reactions, your choices, your voice, your stillness. These are your tools, these are your responsibilities. Everything else belongs to the winds. Let it go. Not out of bitterness, but out of love for the life you can shape. You rest tonight not because the world is fine, but because you've finally accepted that trying to hold it together with your bare hands only breaks you. So let others walk their path. Let the outcomes unfold. Let the unknown remain unknown. And let yourself, at long last, rest in the freedom of surrender. You lie there, quietly amazed by how different the world feels when you're no longer trying to steer it. It's not that the chaos has disappeared. The noise still exists. People will still misunderstand you. Life will still throw sharp corners where you expected soft landings, but your stance has shifted, and that makes all the difference. You begin to realize something profound, something the Stoics knew all too well. You are free the moment you stop needing things to go your way. Freedom is not comfort, not certainty, not ease. Freedom, as the Stoics defined it, is the ability to choose your response in any circumstance. It is the decision not to be ruled by externals, not by praise or blame, not by wins or losses, not even by your own expectations. And when you taste that kind of freedom, even briefly, it changes everything. You think of someone like Cato, who resisted tyranny not because he thought he'd win, but because it was the right thing to do. Even in defeat, even in death, he remained free, because his values weren't for sale. That's radical freedom, and it's available to you right now, not in dramatic moments, but in the small, inner choices you make moment by moment. Like choosing not to spiral when things don't go as planned. Like choosing to let someone's criticism pass through you instead of planting roots. Like choosing to love yourself without waiting for someone else to validate that love. Freedom is found in those subtle pivots of awareness. But here's the paradox. True freedom requires discipline. It asks you to rule yourself when everything around you feels unruly. To guide your reactions, your impulses, your speech, even your thoughts, not through repression but through conscious care. And that takes practice. Not grand gestures, not monk-like detachment, just small, quiet acts of sovereignty. Like the one you're practicing now, letting the night hold you without rushing to fix or escape it. You breathe again, not because everything is perfect, but because you've stopped demanding that it be. There's power in that, and peace. The world may not bend to your will, but your will can bend with the world, like a tree in the wind, not brittle, not broken, but rooted in something deeper than outcome, alignment. Some still argue whether Stoic freedom is too inward, too detached from changing the world, but they miss the point. The Stoic doesn't ignore the world. They just start with themselves, because real change begins with clarity, with resilience, with people who are not easily manipulated by fear or flattery, and that's who you're becoming. Quietly, patiently, night after night. You don't need applause for this kind of work. It's invisible. But you feel it in your breath, in your muscles, in the gentle way you've begun to speak to yourself. This is the freedom of letting go without giving up, of accepting what is without becoming it, of standing where you are and saying, "This is mine to carry, that is not." Let that distinction settle into your bones tonight. Let it unclench the places that still tighten with shoulds and shame. Let it remind you, you are already free, not in every outer sense, but in the deepest way that matters. And freedom, once remembered, rarely disappears. It becomes your rhythm, your breath, your baseline, even here, even now, even in the dark. The stillness has deepened now, so much so you can almost hear your own awareness. It no longer chatters, it watches, it rests. It simply is. And you too are no longer in resistance. You've softened into yourself, and that softness doesn't feel like weakness anymore. It feels like truth. You're not fighting the night. You're not chasing morning. You are here, held. And in this final stretch of your journey tonight, a single truth lingers gently in your chest. It's okay to let go. Not because everything is resolved. Not because you have all the answers, but because letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means making space. It means trusting life again. It means surrendering to the rhythm that carries all things forward, whether or not you have the strength to paddle. This is where the Stoic path always leads, not to control, not to domination of life, but to harmony with it. Not to mastering every emotion, but to being at peace with having them. And you feel that, don't you, right now? In the calm that doesn't demand an audience, in the gentle hum of the room, in your breath slow, unforced, complete. There's a moment near the end of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations where he simply writes, "Soon you will have forgotten all. Soon all will have forgotten you." And yet, in that admission of impermanence, he found peace. Because it wasn't nihilism, it was freedom. You don't have to leave a legacy. You don't have to do something great. You don't have to prove that your life mattered. It does. Because you are here. Because you felt, tried, laughed, rested, struggled, forgave. Because you showed up for yourself tonight in the simplest, quietest way possible, by being. No declarations. No grand gestures, just your heartbeat, just your stillness, just your presence. Some thinkers argue that letting go means losing the will to act, but the Stoics would say, letting go is what allows action to arise from clarity, not chaos. When you release what doesn't belong to you, expectation, control, illusion, what remains is something simple and pure: readiness. Readiness to live tomorrow with a little more ease. Readiness to speak less harshly to yourself. Readiness to move forward not out of pressure but alignment. And tonight, in this soft closing, you don't have to decide anything. You don't have to change. You don't have to plan. You only need to let the quiet carry you a little further. Back to yourself. Back to peace. Back to the place where effort ends and presence begins. You've made it, not because you fixed your life, but because you remembered what's always been true. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not alone. You are enough, exactly as you are, especially now. Let everything fade now. Let the story settle behind your eyes like mist slowly parting from the trees. The thoughts that once pressed against your chest no longer demand your energy. The muscles that once held your stress have softened into the mattress, weightless. Even your breath has forgotten how to struggle. There's no need to stay alert. No need to listen for the next lesson. You've arrived, not at a destination but a depth, not at an answer but a quiet acceptance. This is what it feels like to rest as you are, without becoming, without fixing, without pretending. To lie in the arms of the moment and know, without question, that this is enough. The world outside your window continues to spin. People continue to seek, to strive, to press forward. But you've stepped off the wheel, just for tonight. Just long enough to remember the rhythm beneath it all. The slow, patient rhythm of being. So let your thoughts drift like clouds. Let your limbs grow heavy. Let sleep, gentle, unrushed, forgiving, draw close like a tide. You don't need to try anymore. You only need to trust that you are safe, that you are whole, and that morning will meet you gently, just as night now holds you.